There was this girl I used to be friends with. Her name was Anna. She was a shy girl, quiet. She didn't talk much, but that was fine. She was fine. Despite people constantly telling her that she needed to talk more or smile more, or otherwise completely change the things about herself that made her her. I can only assume that they were trying to make her happier or something, but that did the exact opposite, I think. She talked less, smiled less. I tried to reassure her, to tell her that she didn't need to listen to all those people, but I think it went deeper than that. Slowly, she became depressed, and she stopped talking to me no matter what I said or asked. I wanted to help her. I knew what it was like to be depressed, and I was struggling it with myself, and still am. Though, I think hers was worse. Much worse. She drifted further and further away from me, and anyone, really. You know, there's really not much you can do to help someone if they themselves don't want any help. That's what I told myself, at least, to ease the guilt of not being able to help her get better. But looking back, I should have tried harder. Maybe then, that wouldn't have happened to her. Anyway, my own depression got a bit worse when we drifted apart. She was my only real friend, and it hurt me deeply to see the light disappear from her eyes. One day, however, while I was making my way toward my first class of the day, I spotted her. She was just out in the open, not too far from my apartment, facing away from me. It had been so long since I last saw her, just hanging out outside instead of holed up in her dorm. Maybe she's willing to talk now, I thought to myself, and I couldn't help but feel hopeful. Perhaps we could be friends again. I approached her, reaching out to tap her shoulder. I started to say her name, but stopped when she turned around. She was smiling. It was a huge surprise. Even before her depression took over, she still rarely smiled just out of nowhere and for no reason. But surely that was a good sign? When she realized it was me, she smiled wider and spoke the first words I had heard from her in almost a year. "Hey, I've been looking for you," she said. I remember her words clearly because it was a shock. Not only was she apparently feeling happier, but she was specifically looking for me. I was almost flustered at the idea, but I quickly faded away when I asked her why, and she started giving this roundabout explanation that felt obviously made up. Like an excuse, now that I think about it. But at that point, I wasn't paying attention to what she was saying, but how she was saying it. Her lips were almost tight, if that makes sense. I'm not really sure how to describe it. Like she was talking, but her mouth wouldn't really move to break the shape of her smile. And so, no matter what word, vowel, or sound she made, her mouth would still retain the same wide smile. I didn't even know that was possible. It was like someone was tugging at the corners of her mouth to keep it in place. And her eyes, they held mine with a certain intensity. They were wide, strained. It was to the point where I was uncomfortable even looking her in the eye. It just gave me this weird feeling, and it caused my head to ache. After she finished her long-winded explanation and called out my name to bring my attention back, I snapped out of my thoughts, laughing awkwardly as I realized I didn't remember anything she just said. I tried to play it off and asked her to repeat the very last thing she said. I thought she would display some form of annoyance, but she just happily repeated her last sentence, which was her asking if she could go into my apartment. My apartment? Why? I asked, confused. Just so we can hang out. It's been so long, she responded. I hesitated. I didn't really feel comfortable letting her into my apartment. We were friends before, sure, but that was almost a year ago, and she was acting strange. Still, it felt wrong to just outright refuse her, so I proposed that we just go get something to eat at the cafeteria later to catch up. She didn't seem to like that very much, despite her perpetual smile. So I quickly added on that I had a class right at that moment, so I couldn't do anything with her right then and there. She seemed to accept that, and I went on my way. Occasionally, I would glance back at her, only to see that she was still staring at me, smiling. I can't help but feel like she watched me until she couldn't anymore. I went through the rest of the day, trying my best to focus on my classes. However, my mind kept going back to Anna and the unusual interaction we had. I went on like that until the time came to have lunch with her. However, my English class had assigned a presentation that day, as well as group members, and my group members were pushing to meet immediately to start on the topic we were assigned. Honestly, a part of me was relieved for the excuse. Anna's unusual smile and strained eyes only unsettled me more the more I thought about it, and I didn't think I could sit through an entire lunch with her if she was just going to end up smiling and staring the entire time. So I dug up her contact in my phone from way back when we were friends, and sent her a text to inform her of the changed plans. The text was read, but I received no response. I couldn't dwell on it much longer, as I had to focus on the presentation that would have to be presented in only a week. So I focused on that, working on it with my group members for maybe an hour or two before we parted ways. Then I went about the rest of my day, going back to my apartment shortly after having dinner. At that time, it was already starting to get dark, so when I began walking back to my apartment, there weren't too many other students out, and, well, I got this feeling that I was followed. It's silly, really. Maybe it was just my imagination. I didn't hear any footsteps or see any shady figures. I just got the feeling that I was being watched. And because of that feeling, I rushed back to my apartment and made sure to triple check that my door was locked. I've always had trouble with anxiety and making up scenarios in my head. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination and that I was safe in my apartment. Who would want to follow me anyway? I went to sleep early that night as I had an early class the next day, and also just because I didn't really have anything else to do. Whenever I'm alone, it becomes harder to find the motivation to do anything. I really should have gotten a roommate. That probably would have helped me for many reasons. When I woke up, I quickly got ready for class and made my way to the door of my apartment. When I opened it, I let out a yelp and jumped back. It was Anna. She was kneeling on the floor when I saw her, and I almost didn't at first as I was looking straight forward. Her hands were up and holding something thin and pointy that I couldn't identify, at the same height that my hand on the lock was. However, right after I opened the door, she jumped to her feet and hid her hands behind her back. I didn't know what to do or even say. I was just so shocked. But my shock quickly turned to horror as I took in her face. The edges of her eyes were flushed red and her pupils were dilated. The corners of her mouth stretched from one side of her face to the other, reaching just under her eyes, and the skin was stretched all around it. Her smile had somehow gotten bigger, stretching beyond what was humanly possible. All I could do was stare in horror, trying to understand what exactly I was looking at, as she raised her hand stiffly, waved, and spoke. Her lips barely moved, and for the entire time she had not blinked. "Hello, mind if I come in?" she asked, her voice almost strained. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. I just shook my head, my jaw hanging open. There was no way I was going to let her that into my living space. Why not? She asked in a voice that was as upset as one could get with a perpetual smile on their face. This time, I forced sound to come out of my mouth, but my voice came out strangled and hoarse, still affected by what I saw. You can't. I've got class, I managed to stutter out. Oh, I'll walk you. I refused, but she insisted. It seemed that if I continued refusing her, she would just follow me anyway. So, against my will, I accepted. We started walking to my class. The entire time, she kept trying to catch my gaze, but I did my best to avoid it and keep the conversation going, almost as a way to distract myself, just talking about whatever. I felt like I was trapped, and even when I looked around at others walking by, it was almost like they didn't care. They saw her smile, but they complimented her on it and told her how beautiful it was. Maybe it was just my imagination, but it seemed like the more she got complimented, the bigger her smile looked. How could they not see how wrong her face was? I didn't understand. Was it some twisted, weird hallucination where only I could see how messed up it was? I didn't think I was that depressed. And I'm pretty sure depression doesn't cause hallucinations anyway. Either way, something was definitely wrong and I just wanted to get away. But I couldn't. She stuck by my side for practically the entire day, trying almost desperately to keep my gaze in hers. I don't think she even went to any of her classes. Of course, she wasn't allowed in any of mine that she wasn't a part of. But she was always right there, just outside the classroom or building, waiting for me to be finished. I finally managed to break away from her as I was returning to my apartment sometime in the evening. I made sure to lock my doors and windows tight. I even set up a chair against the door, just in case. I didn't really have proof that she was trying to break in or that anything was actually wrong with her face. I mean, no one else seemed to notice or care. This went on for a few days. I did my very best to avoid her, to avoid any place, really. I couldn't stand to be out any longer than I needed to, for fear that she would find me. And yet, she still managed to every once in a while. She would sneak up behind me without making a sound, so it looked like she would just appear out of nowhere. And every time her smile was just a little wider. I don't even know how I managed to get away from her at those times. It got so bad to the point where I just started skipping classes so I could stay in my apartment, emailing my professors that I was sick. It wasn't a complete lie. I felt sick around Anna, at just the thought of her and her uncanny smile. And I didn't know what else to do. I tried reporting her to the police and the school's safety unit, but I didn't really have proof that there was anything wrong with her or that she was harassing me. I mean, what am I supposed to tell them, huh? That this girl keeps finding me while I'm out in the open and saying hi? And it's not like she had tried to break into my apartment after the first time that I caught her. I really thought I was going crazy. Even now, I'm still not sure. I kept on like that until the day of the presentation. Not that I had contributed much since I started staying in my apartment more. That was the one class I absolutely had to go to. At that point, I had already missed too many classes and I couldn't risk my grades dropping anymore. So I sucked it up and went to class. I kept my head mostly down, hoping that maybe that would keep my face from being recognized by Anna if she were nearby. Maybe if I had looked up, I would have noticed that something was seriously wrong with my environment before I got to my destination. I got to class and sat near the very back, still keeping my head down. A mistake. Then I waited for class to start. I tried my best to keep myself distracted as I went over my notes for the presentation, until finally, it was time for my group to get up. I took a deep breath, stood up, and made my way to the front. I didn't look at anyone, not even to check to see if my group members were coming up too, until I was finally in front of the class. I briefly checked that our presentation was on the board before finally turning to face the others. I froze. Everyone was staring at me, eyes wide, strained. That wasn't how it was supposed to be. Usually a few people were on their phones or doodling in a notebook, but their eyes were all pinned on me. I looked around for my group members, but all the faces looked the same. They all had Anna's face. Not only that, but they were all smiling from ear to ear. No one blinked, no one moved, and in front of them all sat Anna, the real Anna. I could tell that one was her, no doubt. The smile was bigger, deeper, more exaggerated than all the others. My eyes locked with hers and the edges of my vision grew blurry. I tore my gaze away, looking to the professor for help, but she too was locked in place, her face turned into Anna's, frozen in a smile as she stared at me. I couldn't be there a second longer. My breathing picked up. I was hyperventilating. I didn't know what was happening or what was going to happen, but I couldn't be there any longer. I felt sick to my stomach and there was a lump in my throat. Anna, the real Anna, called out my name. I didn't respond. I just stumbled out of there, everyone's eyes following me. The real Anna stood up and I turned to flee. I didn't care about my grades anymore. How could I in that state? I stumbled into the hallway of the building, my legs shaking. There were others, but they also wore Anna's face and immediately turned to stare at me. I heard Anna call my name again, and moments after felt cold, thin fingers tightly grip my wrist. I whipped around and saw that it was Anna, far closer than I ever would have liked. Her grip was tight enough to hurt. I was frozen in fear, right up until she grabbed my face and forced me to look in her eyes. That's when I hit her. Or, really, it was more of a shove. I shoved her to the ground as hard as I could and managed to dislodge her from me. I'm not really the type to lay my hands on a woman, but I was just so scared and panicked I wasn't thinking. And I don't really regret it now that I think about it. It was self-defense. Yeah, self-defense. I booked it out of there, running until I made it back to my apartment where I locked the door. I didn't dare look behind me to see if Anna was following, but I'm pretty sure that she was. By this time, my entire body was shaking uncontrollably. I just leaned against the door, trying my hardest to calm down. I was safe. I had to be. Everything that had ever gone wrong in the past few days had only really happened when I was among others. So if I'm not near others, surely I wouldn't be affected? My apartment made me feel safe, and the longer I stood there with nothing happening, the more I felt calm. Eventually, I was calm enough to go around and make sure that every window was closed, locked, and blocked. I wasn't taking any chances. I didn't want to see anyone or any faces, not even my own. I wanted to somehow convince myself that it was all just a really bad nightmare. I drew my curtains and covered any surfaces reflective enough to show my face. Then I sat on the couch and pulled out my phone to call 911. They still wouldn't help me. They suggested I seek help elsewhere, somewhere that could help me with my hallucinations. I was too tired to fight it any longer, so I called the place they recommended and set up an appointment. Online, of course. There was no way I was going to go out for quite a while. And then, there really wasn't anything else I could do but sit there, convince myself that I was at the very least safe in my apartment, and wait. I waited there for a few more hours, my body relaxing more and more the longer I went without anything happening. Eventually, my eyelids grew heavy, and I dragged myself to bed, quickly falling asleep. My peace didn't last very long, though, as I awoke just a few hours later. I had no idea why, but I could feel the hair on my arms stand up. A shiver made its way through my body. I laid in bed for a few minutes, listening and waiting, hoping that my body was just freaking out over nothing. I couldn't see anything in the dark, but then I felt a breeze just by me and heard footsteps. I jolted upright, whipping my head around frantically. I could barely see anything as my eyes were still adjusting, but that didn't stop my heart from racing. "Who's there?" I called, to no answer. I turned to where my bedside table was and felt around with my hand. I definitely was not just imagining things. I couldn't be. Someone or something was inside, and I needed to call for help. But as luck would have it, my phone was nowhere, not even hiding in the folds of my blanket. And even worse, I didn't see anyone else in there either when my eyes finally adjusted, which meant that whoever it was that I heard was either hiding under my bed or somewhere else in the apartment. Where had I put it? I'm usually pretty good at remembering to place my phone beside me before I go to sleep, and I could have sworn that I had placed it there, and yet it was gone. But that meant if it wasn't in my room, it had to be in a different room in the apartment, which meant that if I wanted to call for help, I would have to leave the room and risk coming in contact with the intruder. I didn't like that idea, and considered that maybe I just imagined it after all. It's not too uncommon for my anxiety to invent sounds and feelings when I'm on edge, and I almost convinced myself that was the case too. That would make things so much easier, wouldn't it? If I could just pretend that it was all in my head and go back to sleep, that I could wake up in the morning and everything would be okay. But then, I heard a smashing sound coming from one of the other rooms, and I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Something was definitely inside. I needed to call for help. The only way to do that was to venture out and hope I found my phone soon, before the intruder found me. Again. So, against my better judgment and all instinct, I got up and made my way out of my bedroom. I peeked into the hallway and debated over whether I should turn on the lights or not. I ultimately decided not to, as that would give away where I was, and slipped into the next closest room, the kitchen, but not before peeking inside to check if there was anyone else. All the while, I stayed as alert as I could, despite how badly I was shaking. I ventured further inside, scanning the countertops and floor for any sign of my phone. Nothing. Of course, it wasn't in the kitchen. That would be too easy, wouldn't it? Before I made my way to the next room, I paused and listened for anything, but the silence was almost deafening. In fact, no new sounds were made since the earlier crash. But I wasn't about to fool myself again. I needed to get my phone. I creeped into the living room, keeping my eyes peeled and my fists clenched, just in case. Still, I saw no one. I quickly glanced toward the front door. The lock was broken and any barriers I had put up had been removed. Of course. I continued looking until I spotted it. Something on the floor that looked very much like my phone, though it was hard to tell in the dark. However, when I got closer, it became clear that it was my phone. There was something wrong with it. It was smashed, broken. Little glass and metal pieces were scattered around it, and laying beside it was a hammer that I usually kept with some other tools below the kitchen sink. Not that I'm particularly good with tools anyway. When I saw the sight, my heart dropped. I knew for a fact that I hadn't smashed my phone. Something else did. Something with opposable thumbs that could grip and wield a hammer. Something smart enough to know to disable my only immediate means of calling for help. I wasn't safe. I never was I? It was only a matter of time before whoever it was jumped out at me and did who knows what. And I had a pretty good idea of who it was. Or should I say, she. I bent down and picked up my phone, frantically tapping at the screen, hoping and praying that it would turn on and that it would still work. While I did that, I frantically looked around to see if I could see her anywhere. I have no idea how she even stayed hidden for that long. My apartment wasn't that big. But then, I heard a creaking coming from right behind me, in the direction where my phone was, before I picked it up. I had completely forgotten in my fear and panic that there was a closet right there. One that I usually kept my shoes and jackets in. One that was big enough to fit a person. I I whipped around, eyes wide as the door creaked open. Long, bony fingers wrapped around the edge. A face peeked through. Anna's face. Her smile wider than I ever thought possible. Her pupils so small and strained that her eyes were practically all white. In the dark of the room and closet, she only looked more creepy, more crazed. Her movements were unnatural as she reached a hand out to grab me. She was stiff, weak, as if she hadn't been eating. I was frozen in fear, my legs shaking so hard as I awkwardly stumbled back. My breathing, which I had been trying my absolute hardest to keep quiet, started coming out in quick, sharp gasps. "Anna?" I stuttered out, my voice hoarse. She didn't respond. I don't even think she could with a smile that wide, that deformed. A smile wide enough to contort her entire face. I needed to get away, but to where? If I left my apartment, I would just see her face over and over again in the faces of others. But maybe that would be safer. And she definitely looked weak enough for me to outrun her and get some help. So I turned to bolt toward the door, but my movements were choppy, constrained by my fear. Anna grabbed my arm, her grip tight, much stronger than last time despite her fragile appearance. I screamed and tried to shove her off me again, but this time she wouldn't let go. A pained, strangled sound exited her mouth. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but my heart rate skyrocketed. I screamed at her, pleading for her to let me go, but she wouldn't. My eyes locked onto the hammer, still on the ground. It was the best weapon that I could reach. Pure adrenaline launched me at it, desperately grasping for it, but Anna was faster. She lunged as well, grabbing my other arm with her hand and pinning me against the nearest wall. "No!" I cried out, but was quickly silenced as her hand covered my mouth and gripped my jaw. She was forcing me to look right into her eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. I could feel my muscles growing weak as I tried my best to struggle out of her grip, but she held me there and stared. I couldn't do anything. Eventually, my body stopped struggling. I couldn't move. All I could do was just stare back at her, locked in her gaze. I was so scared that she was going to try to kill me, but she didn't. She just stared, her messed up face seeming to grow and contort before my eyes. She stared until my vision went black. I must have passed out. When I awoke, I had fallen to the ground. Anna was nowhere to be seen. My whole body felt stiff, but what hurt the most was my face. My jaw, and specifically my cheeks, had this dull, aching pain. When I came to my senses, I jolted upright, looking around frantically for any sign of Anna or any clue as to what she had done to me. But still, nothing. Even slight movements of my head caused my cheeks to throb. I felt at my face. It felt strange, stuck, like I couldn't move it. My eyes felt dry, and I tried to blink. I couldn't. Something was wrong. I had to see my face. I stumbled over to the bathroom, tore down the towel I had put up to cover the mirror, and looked at my reflection. I had suspected that this would be the case. I just didn't want to believe it. But with my face staring right back at me in the mirror, I couldn't dispute it. My face was frozen in an unnatural smile. I tried to scream, but my lips were locked in place. No, this couldn't be happening to me. How could it have happened to me? What did Anna do to me, and where was she now? With nothing else to do, I stumbled out of my apartment. It was morning at that time, and I made a beeline for the nearest person I saw. I didn't really notice it back then due to my fear, but no one had Anna's face anymore. Everyone was back to normal. I tried to call out to them to speak or just make any sound at all. I tried gesturing frantically to get them to call for help for me, but they complimented me on my smile and went on their way. Every person was the same. It was like they couldn't see my pain. They couldn't see that there was something deeply wrong with me, that I needed help. Every person I went to had the same reaction. I wandered around for who knows how long, maybe days. I was desperate for help, desperate and starving. I could barely open my mouth. And with each day, I could feel my smile getting wider and the pain in my face getting worse. My eyes began watering, yet at the same time they felt dry and rough, like there was dust sticking to them. Eventually, I got to the point where I learned to talk, even just a little, even with my mouth being the way it was. But even that wasn't enough to get any help. I walked all the way to the police. Nothing. I went to the hospital, both the physical and mental one. It took forever, but no one would help me. My thoughts started to get away from me. They started to change. They were urging me to do something. I didn't know what, and I really didn't want to find out. I don't know how, but I eventually found you guys, and, well, here we are. When I asked for help, I didn't know that it would result in this. Do you guys even know how to help me? Do you guys even believe me or see what I'm talking about? Or are you just like everyone else? I'm in a lot of pain. My thoughts, they're becoming stronger than I am. I don't know what'll happen if I let it take over. Please help me. Please. Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and thank you for listening to my story, The Girl Who Smiles. This story was inspired by my own experience with people always telling me to smile or to change aspects of myself to be more appealing. Of course, I think it goes without saying that this is a gross exaggeration of it, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. October has been really busy for me this year, so I kind of had to rush a little bit with this video so that I would have time for everything else. I hope it's still spooky enough for October. Hopefully you noticed that I tried out a little bit of a different art style for this video. Let me know what you think. Is this style more fitting for the creepy vibe of the story? Should I continue with it in further CreepyDrawstas? But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of this kind of content. And if you're interested in more of my art, feel free to follow me on Instagram. The link's in the description. Take care and farewell.